Happy Friday, everyone. I am SEAC retired John Wayne Troxell, and this is Leader Talk. Welcome to this month's show. Today, I have a great show today, and I have two wonderful gentlemen that are going to be my guests. And I got to tell you how I've met these two gentlemen today. In February, I was introduced to one of these gentlemen by a good friend of mine, retired Command Sergeant Major Jason Van Cleet. And I was invited out to spend time with the House of Representatives in the state of Oklahoma. I had such a great visit there. I was just back there this week, and I got to spend time with both of these gentlemen. And I think on Leader Talk here, we try to look at the art of leadership from various angles. We've obviously had great military leaders on here, like my former boss, the 19th chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Marine General Joe Dunford, retired, as well as the former Supreme Allied Commander Europe, Army General retired Mike Scaparrotti. And in my most recent show, I had former presidential nominee and also Army reservist, the Honorable Tulsi Gabbard. Well, today I am bringing on two gentlemen that I consider close friends now. And I've met them, and they are both two dynamic individuals that I highly respect and admire, and they are doing wonderful things for the great people of Oklahoma. My first guest has served in the Oklahoma House of Representatives since 2016, and he's the first Democrat to represent his district in Northwest Oklahoma City in 30 years. He is the former vice chief of the Native American Caucus and co-host of the bipartisan podcast Inside the Capitol with my other guest, Republican Majority Leader Josh West. We'll get more into that podcast here as we get into the show. He is an attorney by trade and is married to the Reverend Dr. Lori Walke, who is a doctorate of ministry. His name is Representative Collin Walke. He's a Democrat and represents District 87 of Oklahoma. And my other guest currently serves as a majority leader of the Oklahoma House of Representatives. He was first elected to the Oklahoma House in 2016. He serves on multiple committees. He's born in Tulsa, raised in Grove, Oklahoma. He's always had a heart to serve, joined the Army in 1996, served in combat twice as an infantryman, and on his worst day of his life, on 16 October 2003, he was critically wounded in a firefight in Karbala, Iraq, where that same firefight saw his battalion commander and two of his fellow non-commissioned officers get killed in action. For his actions in that fight, he earned the Purple Heart and Bronze Star with V device. And since he's been in office, he also, when he's not doing his duties as the Republican representative District 5, he also works as a lean coordinator for Simmons Foods, and his wife, Elizabeth, is a mental health provider and regional director for Grand Lake Mental Health Center. Ladies and gentlemen, give a warm welcome to Leader Talk to Representative Collin Walke and Representative Josh West.
Thanks for having us, SEAC.
Hello.
Good morning, gentlemen. It is so awesome to have you two guys on the show here. As I said before, two guys that I met only a few months ago, but I admire and respect. So thanks for taking time out of your busy schedules. So how are you guys doing today on this happy Friday? Collin, how you doing?
Doing great. It is a good Friday. We're out of session for the day, which means that I'm up here at the Capitol working with no one bothering me. So it's a good Friday for me.
Awesome. And Josh?
Yeah, it's good to be home. We kind of talked about before, we're not in sessions on Fridays. I'm up there at the Capitol Sunday through Thursday night or Friday morning. So Fridays allow me to get out into my district, and I have a rural district, so it's a big spread out district. And so I'm able to take my kids to school Friday mornings and then, meet with my constituents with appointments. So it's good to be back home for a couple of days, and then we'll start all over Sunday back at the Capitol.
Awesome. So I've got to tell our audience, first of all, I've never been associated with politics, and I absolutely do not have any political aspirations, but I do care about my country, and I care about the citizens of the United States of America. So obviously I care about those that have been elected to represent the citizens of the United States of America, which is why I wanted to bring you two gentlemen on here today. And when I first met you two, obviously Jason introduced us, Josh, and you invited me out. But I walk into your office And the first thing I notice about you two guys, and I guess it's just a thing in Oklahoma, that politicians wear nice suits and cowboy boots, and here you were behind your desk, and you got a Copenhagen dip going, and Collin sitting over on a chair with his feet up on your table and drinking coffee. And I never in a million years would I have thought that, Josh, you were a Republican and Collin was a Democrat. And it was just amazing to me. And maybe, I was over, acting at the point in terms of what I was seeing, but seeing two people from the opposite aisle being so close and friendly. So let me start off by asking, how did you guys become such good friends, and how did this, even though you have different views on a lot of issues, I know, pro-life, pro-choice, First and Second Amendment, but how did you build this relationship between you two and get your differences aside? Josh?
Well, SEAC, I think if you'd have talked to Collin and I back in 2016, when we first came in the house, that we'd have told you the same thing. Never in a million years would you think we'd be friends, and not just friends. I mean, we're brothers. And, we got elected in 16, like you said. We both came in. I was a military guy. He was an MMA guy. And so we had this similar personalities as far as we're aggressive, and sometimes people take that the wrong way, but I could not stand Collin Walke. I mean, I don't know a way to put it. I wanted to kick his ass, and vice versa. And there was some point in our first year we got put in special session. So we were basically at the Capitol we got elected in 18, November of 2008, or I'm sorry, November of 2016. Session started that following, early 2017, and we didn't get out of session until the following May, because we were at session, back-to-back special sessions, and then regular session. And so there was some point during the first special session where we were at an event together or something, and started talking, and I really wanted to hate the guy. I mean, but anyway, we had the conversation, which we talk about that often, is having conversations, but started talking, and next thing you know, I'm calling him up, and we just began kind of working on things that we could agree on. And I won't tell the whole story. Walke can take over, but just we talk about it a lot, that people gather their political insight from a national level at times, and they look at what happens on TV with R's and D's. And, I pride myself in the fact that we're not Washington, D.C. It's very easy for me to get up into a press conference and talk about how shady the Democrats are, and they are, but I don't have to say that, and it does no good. And so we're not DC. We can't print money out. We're constitutionally mandated to balance the budget. And so just by being at the state level, it forces us to work across the aisle. And like I said, 6 years later, I mean, I'll go to war for Collin Walke and his family. I mean, they're great friends of mine and my wife. And, we have a true friendship, and I love the guy. I mean, he's good people.
Awesome. Go ahead, Collin.
Yeah, so I have to echo all that about same for Josh. I'll say two things. The first thing that I'll say is when I came in, I thought my job was to punch the Republicans and make them look as stupid as I could. Because like most people, like you as well, Command Sergeant, we get our information from the national politics. But the reality is if you walk next door to your neighbor and check up on them, you don't care if they're a Democrat or Republican, right? It's a matter of proximity to the people. And so when I came in, I had that attitude, but through my conversations with Josh and really establishing trust between one another, that was really a key. So, for example, during the teacher walkout in Oklahoma, during those special sessions because of the budget process and the budget failures that we had a bunch of teachers up here, and they loved us Democrats. It was the first time and only time since I've been elected where people were up here cheering for us. So they would go down to Representative West's office and berate him and talk about how he's anti-public ed and isn't willing to do this, that, and the other. And Josh would say, I'm not lying to you. Ask Collin, because in our conversations, we would have those frank, honest conversations. And I would come down and I'd vouch for Representative West and some of the other Republicans that they weren't lying to these people. They weren't giving them misinformation. They were speaking the truth, but from a different perspective. And so those conversations that Representative West and I had really helped us to see each other's perspective rather than fight about which one is right. That's for the people to decide. That's for the judges to decide, et cetera. But it's the establishment of trust and recognition that we're all trying to do the best we can.
Yeah. So, looking at both your gentlemen's background and then, kind of the misperception at the national level, it would seem to me that Collin, on any given day, you're ready to put Josh in a rear naked choke, or Josh, you're ready to pull out, your M4 with a holographic sight on it, and take aim at each other, But seeing you both and how you were, it was just so refreshing to me. Now, this is Leader Talk, and we talk about leadership and the art of it and everything. Both you gentlemen, and Collin, you especially, you were the first Democrat in your district elected in 30 years. Okay. And Josh, you were elected, at the same time. You both represent about 40,000 constituents, and not all of them are Democrats and Republicans. So obviously the majority voted for you all that got you elected and everything. But what are the key attributes do you think as a leader of a district or, representing 40,000 people? What are some key attributes to make sure that you are trying to develop unity within your district and that you're looking out for all your constituents, even though they may disagree with you? How do you get after that? And Josh, Collin, I'll go with you first this time.
I think that the key to really any effective leader is to listening. When you go out and you're knocking on doors, and the difference between local elections and federal elections we're actually on your doorstep, right? We're actually meeting these people. And what I have found is if you sit there and you start talking to people without listening to what their issues are, what their concerns are, you're likely to miss the boat. And even people who disagree with you, if you allow them to voice their disagreement, they're much more reticent or ready to hear what you have to say in response. I think too often leaders speak first and listen second. And that's the exact inverse of what is actually beneficial. So I've always taken the approach, listen, I don't have to agree with you in order to hear you. And more importantly, as your representative, it's my job to represent your voice. It's my job to help you if I can help you. I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. You call up here looking for help, I'm going to help you. I don't ask how you voted or any of those sorts of things. I'm your voice. But again, that takes somebody who's willing to listen to what those causes and complaints are. And so I've always viewed leadership as coming from a listening perspective as opposed to a speaking perspective.
Awesome. Josh, your thoughts?
Yeah, so like Collin said, our main job is to help people. And there's never a time when someone has called my office when I've asked what their political affiliation is. I don't care. And usually when they call us, it's reached the point where they're in dire need. It's and a lot of times it's federal situations. And so whether it's, Social Security or a passport, or there's a whole veterans issues. I mean, a lot of the veterans issues that we get questions on are with the feds. And so although we're from the state level, we can facilitate those conversations. And so, like you said, we represent about 40,000 people. And, even the people like Walke said, it's about listening and being available to your constituents. I mean, if I could tell someone that's looking to get into politics, the number one thing is to be available. When someone calls me, I'm going to call them back. Not maybe a day later, but I'm going to call them back. And it's, I'm in a rural area of the state. And so my district is big and spread out. Collin's in an urban area of the state, and his district's more, centralized. And, but with the rural area of the state, it's a different dynamic. It's more personal. The House is more personal anyway, because we got to run every 2 years, and that's we're closest to the people. But like I said, I don't care what their political affiliation is. When they call me, I'm going to help them. And I think the fact that when people call me, I always feel like I got a good peg on my district, because my district, I live in the country, and they're going to tell me whether they're happy, mad, sad, pissed off, whatever the case. And even if they leave that conversation still not agreeing with my position, the fact that I can explain it to them, why I voted a certain way, that means all the world, because at least I will listen to them, and I can talk smart on why I voted. We just don't vote for things. We actually do our research. I mean, there's a long process the legislative path is a long process. And so by the time that bill gets to the floor, we have seen that bill many, many, many times. And there's no debate on the floor that's going to change my mind. I've already made up my mind. I've read the bill. And so a lot of the stuff you see on the floor is a showmanship. I see Walke laughing, but you know, the fact that we're available and we listen, that means the world to your constituents. Give me a
Yeah,
microphone, bro. I'm going to keep talking.
So, one of the things that the American people see a lot of is, and especially at the national level, they see a lot of political leaders on both sides of the aisle that do things like virtue signaling, genuflecting, and in some cases, even ostracizing those that might disagree with them. To me, that is what kind of creates this divide up there. So when you have this construct at the national level that starts at a divide, in my opinion, and I'll ask you gentlemen for your opinion, that can almost make it tougher for you to get after the things you need to do at the district and local level. Your thoughts on that, Collin?
Yeah, so you bring up several good points there. So the first one is I'm sure this has happened to Representative West. It's happened to me. We catch flack for being friends with one another, right? And I attribute that, though, not to the majority of the people in my district. I attribute that to the people who are diehard liberals or diehard conservatives who are unwilling to compromise on any issue. But to your point about this divisiveness, I really see it as a systematic problem, right? So if you think about like our apartheid, you could talk about the injustice there, but even the perpetuators of the injustice were victims of the system itself. And what we're seeing here is a system of politics that is decided by district boundaries. And every single state and every single federal district is gerrymandered. They're gerrymandered in order to ensure that Republicans remain in power or Democrats remain in power. It's a sad reality. I don't want to participate in it, but that's the reality. And when you draw seats, say, for a Democrat, it compels them to run to the left and vote to the left on issues. And when you draw, say, for a Republican, the exact opposite. And what that does is it disincentivizes collaboration across boundaries. So I think it's a sad state of affairs. And it's drawn up as a result of the political system within which we live. And you're right. It's not doing anything to help better our country. It's only serving to further divide us.
Yeah.
Well, and I will disagree on the gerrymandering in Oklahoma. I mean, it's a very transparent process. Every 10 years when we do the, with the census, we redo our district lines. Every state does. It was a public process. We had a whole lot of meetings across the state. I think we had, around 25 meetings throughout the state. It was open to the public. The public had input on this. Walke had input on his district. And I live in rural Oklahoma. The old blue dog Democrats, they're kind of an anomaly. Most of them had changed over to Republican. And so when we were building our maps for our new districts, I couldn't see, I have no access to what their political affiliation is. It's bodies. I needed bodies. I had to pick up bodies. And so I click on the map and it shows how many households live there. So it has nothing to do with the political party. Maybe in an urban area, it may be easy to do that, but I can't, to my east is Missouri and Arkansas. My district joins two different states. And so I can't grow to the east. And so aside from that.
I want to cut you off just real quick because I do want to make one point clear. I'm not suggesting I'm not suggesting that we gerrymandered intentionally, but my district got better, and everybody I've talked to in the House, their districts got better. I think your district got more Republican, right? That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying I agree it was a transparent process. I agree it wasn't political, at least at the state level. I'll disagree about the federal level, but at the state level, I completely agree. But it did turn out that all of our districts got safer for Democrats and safer for Republicans. That's my point.
Well, you can have that opinion, homie. But back to where we were, from the DC level, but like I said, we're not DC. And I think that it's important to have conversations with people that don't look like you, don't sound like you, don't think like you, don't believe like you. We have them all the time. We have them on our podcast. That was one of the main reasons we started to do the podcast. But it's important to have. It usually backs up my own position, but I'm not afraid to have those conversations. And I'm not afraid to talk about the tough issues that are toxic in the media, because the media wants us to get on. That's why, you never hear from the media about the stuff that's going good. I mean, about 85% of everything that's ran on the floor in the House of Representatives is done in a bipartisan way. And it flies off the floor. It's the small things. It's those contentious issues that it's sexy in the media. The media wants to, get the catch the debates and those and continue this rivalry stuff. The media loves that stuff because we like to watch it. And so, but most things we do up there, they're not partisan. We're always going to have partisans between the Republicans and Democrats, and that's fine. I'm a proud Republican, but like Walke said, we get nailed all the time because we're friends. And I think all the time, when you sit down to the person next to you at a ball game or a church or whatever, do you ask them what their political affiliation is?
Yeah.
Man, I don't care. That's a great thing about America. You've got the freedoms to be involved with whatever political party you want to. And just because you don't support me does not mean that I'm not going to represent you to the fullest of my ability and wake up every day. And no one wakes up wanting to do a bad job. I wake up every day and I want to do good for the people of Oklahoma.
Yeah. So you brought up the Inside the Capitol podcast. And I was honored that when I came in February, both you gentlemen had me on as a guest. So kind of talk about, and Josh, I'm going to start with you since you started on it. What was the vision behind the Inside the Capitol podcast? And where do you want to take this thing? Because, during the show that I was on, we were talking about what was going on in our nation. The war had just started in Ukraine. As a matter of fact, I got the Ukrainian SEAC on the phone to join in the discussion with us and everything. So kind of talk about the vision and where you two gentlemen see this podcast going.
Well, the original reason that we started having the conversation about a podcast is we ran a piece of legislation last year. It was House Bill 1602, the Data Privacy Act. And so we started working together on that 2 years before that. We started the interim study process, and it's about data security. It's about, anything in your house is a smart device that spies on you. Your information is sold to foreign countries, enemies of the state, to other businesses. And so we were trying to address this issue of privacy. We think it's wrong for companies to be able to come in your house and spy on you. And so we started working on that, and we thought, what a great way to talk about that piece of legislation that was done as a bipartisan piece of legislation, and kind of give people updates as it moved along the process. And from there, every week I would have a Republican on, he would have a Democrat on, and it just became something bigger than we thought it was going to be. We started. It stemmed not just about the data security stuff, but any topic. When we go into a show, we really don't have an agenda, and it's an open forum, it's open dialect, and and sometimes it gets heated, and that's good. People need to see that, but also need to see that I can adamantly disagree with Walke. We can battle each other. I can choke him on the floor. He can choke me on the floor, but we can still be friends, and I can sit across from the table, and I don't have to call him an SOB, Democrat, baby killer, whatever, the party of death, whatever those catchphrases that the Republicans like to throw out there. I could disagree with Walke and still be friends, and so that's what we started. This is our second year. We did it all last year, and then through the interim, we did a few episodes. It kind of sucks, my partner in crime here is not running for re-election, and so I've got to find a replacement. But I know that we will always be involved with this podcast or future podcasts. I know that, in the military, you make friends for life. And this is the closest thing that I can equate to that camaraderie in the military is being at the house, because it's a small fraternity. There's very few people that have served in this capacity. And you develop friends, you develop brothers and for life. And so that's where we're at. The podcast, I will continue it. And we'll see where it goes next year with Walke out there, but we'll always be involved in something together.
Yeah. The podcast, I think, has been great. It's been great because it gives people a real inside look. When we were talking about our data privacy legislation, we were able to talk about how the lobbyists came in and what the lobbyists were saying and doing, and really giving people some inside look at what happens when you run legislation up here. Because again, most people get all their information from what they see on TV, and the benefits, just like your podcast, these long form discussions allow nuanced topics and nuanced discussions, and everything in life, I believe, is nuanced. I don't believe that there is black and white on really too many issues, right? Yeah. And so really being able to learn more about the other members that we have on as guests, what their issues are, because we all have different passions. My passion eventually became data privacy. We have educators who that's what their passion is. We have physicians, right? So we have all of these diverse backgrounds who are all trying to bring different perspectives to a particular piece of legislation. And that's really been the benefit of the podcast. And, I really think that even though I won't be here next year, I will be back. I will be advocating. I will be up here working on policy, things like that. And I know that our listeners really appreciate the opportunity to have that ground-eye view of what's going on at the Capitol. So it's been a blast. I've really enjoyed it.
Hey, I know that you made an announcement on Facebook that you weren't going to run for re-election, and I know you shared with Josh privately that you weren't going to run. Why not run again? I mean, dude, I'm just here to tell you, you are a dynamic individual, and again, I've only known you for 3 months, but having spent 40 years around people, I consider you someone of strong character. I consider you a leader and everything. Why not run again?
Well, I appreciate that question. I appreciate the compliments as well. It really comes down to this. I think that we all have our roles to play in serving our country. And in particular, when you're serving in office, you have to have a certain function and goal. There are certain people who want to be politicians. There are those people who this is their calling in life. It never was my calling in life. I felt like there was a need for me to be up here for public education, especially at the time when I came in. And now, because there's a super majority of Republicans, there always have been, right? So there's only 18 Democrats out of 101 members of the Republican House, which means that Republicans can do whatever they want. And I mean that quite literally. There are no rules. So I want to be productive. And if I'm sitting here on the House floor for 12 hours a day, fighting legislation that I know what the result is going to be, and like what Representative West said earlier, the debates on the floor, they're pretty, but I'm not going to persuade Representative West to vote against a bill by Speaker McCall. It's just not going to happen, right? And so I really do think that now that I know how the sausage is really made, I can be more effective outside than I can inside. And that includes helping good Republicans. I mean, the mayor of Oklahoma City is a former Republican senator named David Holt, and I support him. And I think he's done a great job. It's hard to do that when you're on the Democratic team. And I am on the Democratic team. I believe firmly in my party's values, but I also know political reality, and I'm a pragmatist, where Republicans are in control. And I'd rather see good Republicans like Representative Josh West in office than I would some of these other more far-right extremists.
Yeah. Hey, so let's talk about the price you pay to be in office. Okay, so if I can put this in perspective for both you gentlemen, and looking at the Oklahoma House of Representatives website, Josh, your annual pay for being a representative is about E4 pay. And Collin, I think your annual pay, an intern in your law office that is in their first year probably makes more money than you're making right now. So obviously, you're not doing this for monetary reasons. And there is talk at the federal level, of how politicians are getting rich and everything. Obviously, you guys aren't getting rich. Obviously, you have employment outside of this, and you also have working spouses. So talk to me about this civic duty, this civil service, and the pride that comes with serving. Obviously, both you gentlemen ran for election to make a difference, but talk to me about this when the only benefit you really get out of it is what you do for the people there. And in the end, that's what it should be about. But talk to me about this.
Well, you got to want to serve. Like I said, you're not going to get rich with this. We get accused all the time of patting our pockets, like you said. And I'm like, where's this money at? Because I'm not seeing it. And so there's a lot of stuff that people see on the national media. And so that trickles down. And we all get lumped into the same basket at times. But no, you got to want to serve. And for me, it stems back to, I remember when I was a kid in elementary school here in Oklahoma, they used to give us coloring books with our state delegation, the federal delegation, and a guy here in my district, Rick Littlefield, he was elected in 1982. Him and my dad were really good friends. They went to school together. And he was up here until 2005 when term limits kicked in Oklahoma. Prior to that, we didn't have term limits. And so I remember being about 10 years old, and I was in Cub Scouts, and I was selling popcorn for a fundraiser. And my dad took me by Mr. Littlefield's office, and he had a picture of him and President Reagan. And Rick was an old Blue Dog Democrat. He had a picture of him and Reagan, a picture of him and the governor. And I remember telling my dad, I want to be like Mr. Littlefield. And he said, my parents kind of held that over my head growing up, and I kept my nose clean. That's one reason I joined the military too. Everything I did as a young adult and as an adult, I thought about, is this going to affect my ability to serve, when the chance, comes. And so when this seat opened up, and it was in 2016, I started campaigning in 2015. I had no idea what I was doing, and there's no one to teach you how you're doing. It's trial by fire, especially in an open seat. No one wants to really pick sides, the incumbents, because if you back the wrong person, you're gonna piss off whoever's coming in. And so they're very careful about who they endorse. And so it's about who does the work. And from July of 2015 to the Republican primary in June, I did nothing but knock Republican households from July till November of 18, July of 15 till November of 16, I knocked about 10,000 doors. Every free chance I got, I was knocking doors. And so it's a lot of work to get here, and it's a lot of work to stay here, because you've always got the stuff coming from the outside. The incumbents aren't looked well upon from a national standpoint. Everybody's like, get rid of the incumbents. And so you have to ensure that you get your message out there and be available and things like that, like I talked about earlier. But you got to really want to serve. And I miss so much that camaraderie from the military, that brotherhood. And this definitely helps with that. It plays a big part in that, because you do develop it's the closest thing to the military without being a military. We started a Veterans Caucus in 2017 with the sole intent, and it's a bipartisan, bicameral caucus. So R's and D's, House and Senate. And it was, we have a caucus
on Thursday.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a caucus for everything. And so we started this caucus for the Veterans Caucus to help recruit veterans to serve, because obviously we handle stressors different than the average civilian. And so, but it all goes back to service. My wife was in the Air Force too. She was on a Spectre gunship, and then got out, and we came back home. But it's all about the service. It's not about the money, because you don't make hardly any money. I lose money because of my I keep an apartment all year long in Oklahoma City. The wear and tear on your vehicles, traveling back and forth, and my time's not worth money. I have 4 young kids. And if I'm going to continue to serve, I can serve 6 more years, then I got to feel like I'm getting something done, because the payoff for me is that my kids get to experience government firsthand. And so that makes up for the BS that you got to deal with, and the relationships at the Capitol too.
So Collin, your motivation, successful lawyer and everything, your wife, a doctor of ministry and everything, the motivation to come and serve and basically take a huge pay cut of what you're doing. Well, talk to me about the motivation there.
Yeah, everybody thinks that you're going to come up here and get rich, and that ain't the case. Even lawyers, they think that you're going to come up here and make all these great connections and get great clients. And that is not the case at all. In fact, I think it's kind of the opposite. Since you're involved in politics, they kind of want to stay away from you. I guess I was always told I was going to be a politician. My father was involved in local politics. He was on the school board, those sorts of things. And people said because I could speak well, I'd either be a preacher or a politician. But I've never had that politico mindset. I've never wanted to be a politician. I ran for office the first time in 2014 because the state representative in my district was identified as the #1 enemy of public education. I'm a product of public education. I'm a strong believer in it. And at that time, we were having severe issues. And that's why I ran. I lost that first election by about 500 votes. But I got into it because I believed in the cause. I believed in something greater than myself. I'm not motivated by money. I'm motivated by doing the right thing. And I think most of the representatives up here are in that exact same boat. And what's interesting, when you bring up the pay issue, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because if you don't pay well, then only individuals who have money or the wherewithal are the ones that run. If you pay well, then it opens up a lot more opportunities for teachers, the average person, whatever, to be able to run for office. So it's a good debate to have. How much should legislators be paid? What type of people does that bring in? Does it bring in people who are able to do it, or only the people who have the money to do it? But the motivation can't be money. Certainly at the local level, I would imagine. At the federal level, we may be having a different conversation.
Hey, so I was honored the other day, gentlemen, to witness the House of Representatives in action on the House floor, and I saw a spirited debate between 2 of your fellow representatives down there, and it looked like a very genuine authentic kind of debate that they were having. So let me ask you this, because a lot of Americans, when they see this, they will be critical of it, because sometimes, is this genuine? Is this authentic? Or is this theater? You know, so talk to me about that. And then how do you get to bipartisan agreement, even though the constituents you represent may be on the opposite end of what you're trying to get done? So kind of talk through that, because that kind of gets after the art of leadership as well. And Collin, I'll start with you.
There is a lot to be said for performative politics. And I mean, during the teacher walkout, the special sessions, because of our budget processes, one of the Republicans, Representative Scott Fettgetter, gave a great debate and was talking about how we were all standing up and peacocking, you know, showing off our feathers, etc. And Representative West and I talk about it all the time. You know, sometimes it does turn into WWE up here, right? First thing I would say is that the vast majority of that are on those wedge issues, those issues that aren't about 75% of the people 75% of the time. It's about 15% of the people 15% of the time. That's the way I view those performative issues. But I would venture to guess, like what Representative West said, you know, most of the bills that pass off the House floor are overwhelmingly bipartisan. So when you see a debate on a substantive issue for one of those bills that might otherwise pass, they're sincere. Or you could even look at a bill recently. So, for example, recently there was a vote on a tax credit, tax incentive for a company to come here to Oklahoma. And, you know, I think that still passed overwhelmingly, but there were genuine concerns that were aired. And so what I would say is I think that you could determine the sincerity of a debate based off of the import and impact of that bill. If we all know how that bill is going to go because it's a wedge issue, it's performative politics. If it is something that you can tell has a substance behind it, and I know that's kind of in the eye of the beholder, but just think about those bills out there that really affect you on a day-to-day basis, your taxation rates, you know, whether or not you have data privacy, you know, the legal ramifications of a bill, those sorts of things. I think that you can determine whether somebody is here based off of how impactful that legislation will actually be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the bill you were talking about, I think it was Andy Fugate and Mark McBride, and I would say that his questions are always well thought out. Andy does a good job. I mean, he's not just a really progressive guy. He's a
former
Republican at one time, yeah. And so that was the debate you were talking about. But yeah, sometimes there is an element of performance. I can count on two hands in the last 6 years the amount of times that I have debated on the floor. Like I said, I try to handle that stuff, especially because we do have a supermajority. I try to handle that business outside, either in committee or before it gets to the floor. If I've got serious questions, I mean, I don't want to put people on the spot. Even Dems, I mean, like I said, no one's going to change my mind with the debate. And so with legislation, there is no perfect bill. And Collin said there is no black and white. There is a lot of gray area, and you can probably take any bill we vote on and spin it. You know, there's a lot of outside groups that get involved during election years. You know, I'm on the ballot this year. I know that I will have IEs running against me from some groups here, and they can take any bill I vote on and twist it. And people, unless they ask the questions, that's why I said it's so important to have a relationship with your representatives and your senators. Because if not, you're going to believe whatever is on Facebook. And so there's no perfect bill. You know, I kind of use the old Ronald Reagan theory, the old 80-20 theory. If I can get 80% good, you know, I'm not going to kill the bill. And so you know, sometimes it's needed to have some of that performance out there. You know, it's important to always have spirited debate and those tough conversations. And if you can't do it before the bill's presented on the floor, then what a better time when the cameras are on you and the gallery's full of people. So that's part of it too.
And I think Representative West mentioned a great point, which is the frequency of debates, right? So Representative West said, I don't debate that often. And I've gotten to the point in my career the last 2 or 3 years, I haven't either. But if you look at those people who are most popular amongst the far extremes of either party. It's the people who are constantly tweeting, the AOCs of the world, the Cawthorns of the world, whatever. So it's people who constantly want to be heard and seen, those constant virtue signals that you were talking about earlier. That's where it really becomes performative. And you'll see people stand up and debate constantly on bills. And, that does not lead to bipartisanship, because if I stand up and I call you an idiot every single day, what are the odds that you want to work with me? Slim and none. Which is part of the reason why Representative West and I have been so effective as legislators. Even me as a Democrat, I've been able to get bills signed because I don't stand up and punch the Republicans in the face every single day. They realize that when Walke speaks, he's got something to say. So I think frequency, learning not to speak and when it's appropriate to speak, is extremely important to build those relationships for bipartisanship.
That's awesome. So, gentlemen, the past few years, there's been a lot of contentious stuff going on in our nation. Obviously a global pandemic that we've had to deal with, the unrest of 20 based off the death of George Floyd, the January 6, 2021 events at Capitol Hill, and then, foreign policy wise, our abrupt withdrawal from Afghanistan. And now we have a war in Eastern Europe going on. And then within that, we've had issues, and we do have issues with inflation, rising gas prices, supply chain issues, stuff like that. With all of these things that go on, what are some of the conversations you have in your districts with your constituents, to, kind of talk to them that we're going in a direction we need to go, or that we're going to get after these problems that we have, and we're going to continue to get after the needs of the American people? How do you have those conversations? Because I would assume for both you gentlemen, sometimes those are tough conversations when you're going door to door and talking to people. And Josh, I'll start with you first on this.
Well, that's why it is important to get out and talk to your constituents. And we keep saying it, a lot of our constituents, their political biases are based off federal stuff that really doesn't affect the state at times. Yeah. With Afghanistan, I remember, when you came in, you specifically, you called the SEAC. Well, that was Afghanistan, but that was the Russian ordeal. But with Afghanistan, we did the podcast that week and had members of the Veterans Caucus on there, and it was personal to us. A lot of us, and it's easy to armchair quarterback anything up there. And I've been out of the service since December 6th of 2005. But I got a lot of friends, my group that I came with in the mid 90s, they're reaching that 25-year mark, and they are, 26-year mark. And a lot of them are, there's a few that are still, and a lot of them are retiring, but it's personal. I went to Afghanistan, I went to Iraq. And so when you see, specific with that, every president's had a withdrawal plan from the time that we went into Afghanistan. But the way that this was done, that's what really was a black mark with a lot of the veterans, is they felt like the last 20 years, everything that they've done was done in vain. That was perception. And those relationships that we made with those Terps and those SIVs and those families that were with us for 20 years, every time another unit would rotate out, another unit would rotate in, they would stay with the U.S. Service members and risk their life every day. And we left them hanging. And so that pissed a lot of us off. I mean, I was for 2 weeks straight, I was on the phone every day with someone from the State Department or whoever would help me, my federal delegation, trying to get interpreters, trying to get people that helped us out and that had SIVs already to get them over here. And so things like that, that's easy. I could take a personal opinion on, but a lot of the stuff, you have to go back and explain to your constituents, this is a federal issue. And, as a state representative, we're there to kind of be a buffer between the government and the people. We're there to speak on behalf of the people and be a buffer and keep government, as a Republican, I'm not anti-government. You got to have government, but I want to keep it as small as we can and ensure that I realize that everything I do is funded by taxpayers' money. Every single thing I do at this job. And so that's always in the forefront of my mind, that you guys pay my salary, and every bill that I vote on not only affects myself and my family and your family, but my kids and generations down the road are going to be affected by everything I do up there. So, your constituents will hold your feet to the fire, but it just goes back to getting out in the public and having those conversations. I never vote on something worried about if I'm going to get an opponent or if I'm going to lose an election or what have you. I do what I think's best, and I go back home and explain it. And I do a lot of forums, a lot of eggs and issues type stuff. I'll do a pre-session forum, a mid-session forum, then a post-session forum when I leave this podcast, I'm driving over to Craig County, District 7 to Rusty Cornwell. And I'm going to go to his. It's not my district, but he asked me to come, kind of help him give an update to his constituents. And so just getting out and talking. And while we're there, we'll take questions. Most of that forum that we're doing will be taking questions from the audience and finding out what's important to them.
And Collin, if the George Floyd incident did anything, I think the video doesn't lie. And even from a guy like me that's been apolitical my whole life, I sensed a little desensitivity on part of the law enforcement there. And I think that's what a lot of what drove the kind of unrest in 20 and then some other events. So as you're looking to, one, continue to show that we have to have rule of law and we got to do things right, but also we have to have reform. As you talk to your constituents, how do you get the message out that will resonate with them that, yeah, we're going to get after things that will protect citizens, but we also have to understand that we've got to have that rule of law and we got to support our law enforcement. How do you get after that?
Yeah, and you're right, because it's a very difficult topic. Because to your point, the federal politics paint us locally, right? And while I don't think I've ever heard President Biden use the phrase defund the police, right? Even President Obama came out against that. That's been the talking point nationally that trickles down to us here in Oklahoma, even though that's not necessarily what we're wanting or seeking to do. So in having these conversations, the first thing that I do is I try and ask questions. I try to be Socrates, because if you ask questions in the right way, you can lead people to the answer that you want them at, right? And so when having these conversations with friends or constituents who are on the left, who are talking about defunding the police or something along those lines, my question is, okay, well, what's the goal here? And they say, well, the goal is to save lives. And I go, okay, well, if the goal is to save lives, I agree that rear naked chokes, for example, can kill somebody. But I also know, as being a jiu-jitsu practitioner for 8 years, you can choke somebody out time after time safely and they'll live. And so for me, it's saying, okay, if we're looking to save lives, that should also include consideration of the police officer's life. Because if I'm in a fight, I understand and appreciate that one of the most effective things I could do is take somebody's back and give them a rear naked choke, right? So instead of handcuffing law enforcement, why don't we do this? Why don't we invest money, not defund the police, but invest money in the police in training for things like jiu-jitsu, right? It always astonishes me because every year there's a charity fundraiser here in Oklahoma. It's a fight between cops and firefighters. And every year the cops get beat. And I don't understand it. I'm like, aren't you trained to do this? And my point is I think that if we invested more time in cops being adequately trained, we get the results that everybody wants. Police officers feel safer and criminals aren't, subject to being killed. So it's getting people to the point of understanding what's the actual concern. Let's get off the talking points. What's the concern? If it's saving lives, there's two people's lives in that issue. How can we protect both of them the best way?
Awesome. And we're getting down towards the end here, gentlemen. So my last question is, I'm sure both of you gotten to where you're at because of a lot of lessons you've had in life. So Collin, I'm going to start with you. Can you give us an example of a leadership lesson in life that kind of got you on the trajectory to where you're at now? And then Josh, I'll ask you the same thing. Go ahead, Collin.
Yeah. What I would suggest is, and I'm going to steal something from you all with mission first, right? So I was never in the military, but continuing to push the rock up the hill. It doesn't matter who has said it first. Michael Jordan said it. Everybody has said it. They've missed more shots than they've made. I have lost more opportunities that I've tried for than I've gotten. But you got to keep pushing that rock up the hill. There's a famous book by a philosopher named Albert Camus, and it's called The Myth of Sisyphus. And, in the Greek, Sisyphus was the guy who was condemned to pushing the rock up the hill only to come back down every single time. And the question posed in that book is why, given all the suffering that humans go through, do we keep going forward? And the answer is you have to imagine Sisyphus with a smile on his face pushing that rock up the hill. I believe that the last easy day was yesterday. And that is what motivates me to keep going forward and pushing that rock up the hill. Because in Oklahoma, for what I want, the odds are long, but I remain ever hopeful.
So can we use that as a book recommendation from you?
Absolutely.
Okay. So Vic, if we can put that up on the screen, that would be great. So Josh, I'll ask you the same thing. And then if you could give us a book recommendation on leadership.
I've had so many great leaders in my life and lessons learned. I mean, I think it's important for me to surround myself with good people, with good leaders. Starting all the way back to my father. I mean, my father passed this year, but from my hero growing up, and then the military leaders I had, Command Sergeant Major Michael Hayes. He was my first battalion commander at Fort Campbell. Sergeant Major Mark Halasnik, one of my platoon sergeants, Sergeant Major Rodney Smith, and then of course Sergeant Major Command Sergeant Major Jason Van Cleek. We started out as young troops together, and 20 some years later, we're still friends. But there's so many lessons of what motivates me. Honestly, you talk about the worst day of your life. When I was shot in Iraq, I got shot in both my legs and my stomach, and I spent a long time in the hospital and physical therapy, and I've got skin grafts on my legs, and I get pissed off every day. Every single day I get pissed off, and I take a shower and I see skin grafts, but I use that as motivation to do good things, because my guys that got killed in Iraq, they're not here to have shitty days or good days. And then to go back to, some things people have said to me, there was a time at the Capitol where we had a group that came in. It was being rowdy upstairs. And of course, my first instinct is to go take care of business. And so I go up top and I'm trying to calm the group down, but they got out of control. They wanted to call me they called me a racist. They called me all kinds of things. And the guy made the comment, I'm going to kick your ass. And I said, you throw the first punch, buddy. I can't throw it, but if you throw the first punch, I'll chunk your butt off this balcony. And I remember looking at Walke down on the floor, and he's like, not everything's an effing nail, Wes. You don't have to hit everything. And that was the Buddha coming out at him. He's my Buddhist friend. And so he was all about peace and getting along with others. And, and so I've used those things in my life. I'll go back and think, when I'm upset and I really want to go at somebody, because there's times, you push me and you push me and you push me. I have candor, and I am a good Delaware County redneck, but I also know how to handle myself publicly, and I'm not going to just be out of control. There's a group that always wants to portray me as this out of control veteran, and he's going to flip out. And no, that's not the case. But I am motivated every day to do the right thing, and I'm going to stand up for what's right. And so that's why I look at every day up there, and I'm a self-motivator. I don't need somebody to say nice things about me for me to be motivated and do the right thing. I'm going to do the right thing regardless. That's what was bred into me as a kid. That's what was bred into me in the military. And as an NCO, I look back in that whole leadership: loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. Every single day, I take my success as a civilian. 100%, I can equate the lessons that I learned in the military that have helped me get through tough times, because there's no one shooting at me. The average person, especially in today's times, it's hard for them to handle adversity and stress at times. It just is. And a society has kind of made it easier on people. And I look at it as, every day that I wake up and I can breathe, that's a good day. And every day I wake up and there's no one shooting at me, that's a good day. And so, that's where I'm at. And, I'm sad that Walke's not going to be with me. I really am sad. I mean, it's you talk about a brotherhood. He's my brother for life, and I'll go to stump for Collin Walke for the rest of my life. And we can still disagree and have our difference of opinions, and that's what makes the world go round. If everybody was like me and thought like me, man, that'd be awesome. But we'd be doing some crazy stuff, I promise you. And so, I always appreciate, it's the friendship that we've made, SEAC, over the last 3 months. I've got to give a shout out to my brother Jason Van Cleek. I mean, he set this thing up a few months back, and it's just grown. And, you were at the Capitol twice in the last few months, and, you're kind of a bona fide Okie now, SEAC. So
I am not going to run for Secretary of the VA. I'm sorry, brother.
Come on now.
Never say
can find
never.
a spot for you.
Hey, so gentlemen, thank you both very much. And Josh, any book recommendations? Collin gave us a great book recommendation. Any book recommendations that you kind of got inspiration from?
Off the top of my head, no, I don't want to make a mistake. There's one I'm thinking of. I can't remember the title too. I just read it. It was a mental health book, and it was actually my therapist recommended it to me. And that's important too. I'm talking about, it's not weakness. If you need help, if you're a veteran or a first responder, whatever, an average civilian, the weakness is when you go blow your dang head off.
Yeah.
It's it's strong to go ask for help, and it takes a lot to go ask for help and to get rid of that stigma associated with mental health. Anything mental health, when I was in, it was looked at as you're going to see the wizard. It's a weakness, and it affected my life in a way that I would have, I could have lost everything I had. I didn't care. I mean, I would self-medicate with, I had multiple surgeries on my legs, and at one point I was taking, 12 to 15 oxys a day because I needed them, but my body got used to them. My doctor said, you are going to ruin your liver, Wes. But then I would tap that on top with Jack Daniels. And so I was a fully functioning addict. And I had to really look back at myself and say, this isn't me. I'm a freaking warrior. And because I don't have to believe the stigma, the media says that you're just because you have PTSD or whatever, that you got to be, you got to be weak and you're a victim. No, I'm a freaking warrior. I'm gonna wake up every day. I'm gonna do the right thing. And I'm gonna be outwardly and outspoken about seeking help. It's strength to go to talk to somebody and help them work through your issues, because if not, you're going to be another statistic, and we'll be talking about, at your funeral, talking about the good things that you did in your past versus the good thing that, that you have to come. So,
yeah. So Collin, I have to ask you, mindfulness, since Josh brought up mental health, mindfulness is something that I think has got to be at the forefront of everything you guys do. You are a jujitsu practitioner, and I'm sure not just physically, but the discipline that comes with that. I'm sure there's a mental and emotional aspect of doing jujitsu that allows you to get after this mindfulness that makes you a better leader.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, have somebody choke you out every single morning and you realize real quick what it means to be mindful under pressure, right? I've been a mindful and meditation practitioner for 20 years. I've started a nonprofit here actually in Oklahoma City for the past 3 years. We've worked with drug and alcohol recovery programs, criminal diversion programs. And the reality is for me that mindfulness is really a training of the mind to make it stronger. We're taught how to exercise, we're taught how to eat right, but we're never taught how to deal with this. I just did a week-long silent meditation retreat a few months ago in isolation. No talking, no nothing, just me sitting in a room for 8 hours all day, but meditating. And it was pure hell. It was the hardest thing I've ever done mentally in my entire life. And so when people, think meditation is just sitting there, it's something easy, it's cool, it's foo-foo, come hang out with me, we'll go meditate, and we'll really see it's actually hard to do, but it's very beneficial. In fact, we say that meditation is a simple practice, but it's difficult to do. So yes, I mean, anybody that's ever interested in it, check me out, check out any books on it, more than happy to help, because I do think that it can help even people with PTSD.
And as we close, go ahead, Josh. I'm sorry.
Ben Cleek talks about it all the time. In the military, we PMSS every piece of equipment we have, and your mind is no different. That's the most powerful weapon you have, and you've got to take the time and sit back and do some preventive maintenance checks and services on your mind. You got to keep your mind strong. So, and before we leave, I got to give a big shout out to the mamas out there. Mother's Day is coming up, and my wife is she's a stud. She's like I said, she's an Air Force veteran, the strongest woman I know. She's takes care of home when I'm here. Plus, she's a mental health therapist and a doctoral student. And so she, if I didn't have my wife, I couldn't do this job. I mean, and so I appreciate everything she does. And my mother. This is my mother's first day without my dad, so we're gonna keep mom busy. But to all the moms out there, we love you and we thank you for what you do.
So, gentlemen, how can our viewers reach out to you? What are your social media handles? Collin, I'll go to you first.
Twitter, it's Walke487. LinkedIn, it's just Collin Walke. Facebook, Collin Walke. And I'm not on any other social media platforms because of data privacy.
Awesome. Josh?
So my house information, josh.west@okhouse.gov. My house phone number is 405-557-7415. My Twitter handle, I don't have the handle number, but it's Representative Josh West. And then I have Facebook is Josh West, or I have an official page, Representative Josh West.
Awesome. Gentlemen, I want to thank you both so much for being here today. This has been phenomenal. I'm sorry we can only do it for an hour. But as I said before, I met you both 3 months ago, and you are, in my opinion, the epitome of what our elected officials should be and should be doing. And even though both of you you two are on opposite sides of the aisle, not just your friendship and your brotherhood, but what you do to work together to bring great things and bring the American dream to the citizens of Oklahoma is just so admirable. And I salute you both for, doing the things you do. So thank you both very much. God bless you. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. We'll see you next week, or excuse me, next month